I'm going to take questions now from the floor. I'm going to take them, I think, in groups of 3, so that the panellists can consider what you've got to say and get through questions a bit more quickly. So, the gentleman here, please, in the blue t-shirt.
Hi, this is actually mainly aimed towards Wanda. One of my concerns with your sort of out of control, know your limits campaigning, is it sounds very much like you're treating it like any other vice or addiction, such as alcoholism or, I don't know, taking cocaine or something like that. The problem with gambling is that if you get stuck into it, you have this mindset of the next win might fix everything, because the very solution to your problems is the outcome of a successful bet. And basically, there's this drive in your brain saying, this might fix everything. And if it does fix everything, then it might, well, maybe I should give it another go. So there's this, it's this downward spiral, and I don't think that's properly being addressed. I mean, things like advertising and stuff is a very serious problem, because that's getting people into it in the first place. But it's the downward spiral that I can't see any way of seriously addressing, or doesn't seem to be being seriously addressed.
Thank you. Gentleman at the back, please. Thank you.
Hello. It seems quite clear that there is a major problem in this, but what seems to be, I think what no one's addressed here is the major solution to this, which is, I believe, educating young people on the problem at hand. You seem to have come up with the idea that you should block all the windows, all the public things and so on and so forth, but that's not just where you learn about gambling. It's in our everyday lives nowadays. Even if you say kids should get off online, if you go to a simple arcade like in the traffic center, there are machines where you keep on putting 1p and 1p's into it. If you're going to start tackling it online in that sort of manner, I think what needs to be done is that you should tackle in the physical aspect as well, because education is key in this situation, because if young people do know the effects of it, the long-term effect of it, they will definitely do it, because they're always looking out for the future.
Thank you, thank you. Let's stop there. Perhaps you'd like to start first. How about...
Which question do you want me to...
Let's hear from the question about the parallel with cocaine addiction.
Yeah. But if I might pause, please, if you don't agree with me. Actually, I think they're very, very similar. I think that people take coke and other drugs because they have a problem, they make some money for a while, and actually all the evidence is when you get into very, very, very hard drugs, what's happened to you is that the fix in every sense of the word that you've been taking isn't enough, and you keep going. And actually, again, this rather small minority that gets into terrible trouble with drugs, the path is almost identical, and the same is true of alcohol. So large numbers of people, I'm of the right age, large numbers of people smoke dope, okay? Nothing ever happens to them other than they're a bit boring and they eat Mars bars late at night. It's not a tragedy, but some people, and it's usually quite a small number, go on to take harder and harder drugs, and by the time you're mainlining heroin, I think we can all agree we have a very, very serious problem. And I think the same is true of alcohol. And I think the evidence shows at the moment that the same is true of gambling addiction. You also said, if I might just go back to this thing about by the time you're really in trouble, you don't know how to set limits. I completely agree with you. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I'm absolutely saying that by the time someone's got into very, very problematic gambling, every advert in the world, every funny video I can do is not going to help. I absolutely agree with you. What I'm trying to do and what the industry is trying to do is to make sure that that group of people doesn't expand and in fact gets lower and lower and lower. So it's and the young man who spoke from the back, I completely agree that one of the things we require is education. And I'll give you just one quick example I may do. I think most people in this room will remember some of the early cigarette ads. And a lot of the early cigarette ads said, if you smoke, you'll die. I summarise, but that's what they said. And it did stop people from smoking. But a group of people didn't stop smoking, and they were young women. and I don't know what the evidence for why that was, but there was sort of 16 to 19-year-old, some people shouldn't be smoking, it's all young women continue to smoke a great deal. And what the anti-smoking campaigners discovered is that saying you'll die just didn't work, so they just didn't believe it. So what they said instead, which is actually true, is your skin will become horrible. And it's amazing how many young women, actually, some of the women in the audience are laughing, but it's absolutely true. It was those sorts of messages that actually began to change the behaviour of young women smokers. So what I'm trying to do at Senate, and what the industry is trying to do through us, is to find some messages that will get through to people long before they become very problematic.
Paul, what would have been the message for you which would have been equivalently powerful, that your skin is going to get ruined?
It probably wouldn't have been that. I think what happens when you become a gambler, so when you go through that invisible line into a problematic gambler and then maybe through to compulsive and pathological, you go into a bubble. You go into a completely anonymous bubble. And if nobody pricks that bubble in one way or another, be it through a workplace intervention or a family intervention or a friend intervention or something like that, then you're going to get further and further enveloped into that bubble before you get to that pathological gambling stage. And the only way you're coming out of that pathological gambling stage is either a suicide attempt, a bankruptcy, or some kind of major rock bottom that pops that bubble for you. So early intervention is so important. So I actually agree a lot with what Vanda's saying. We've had a conversation about the when the fun stop thing. That doesn't help you if you're through that invisible line already. What that will hopefully do is stop people who are still in the recreational gambler category actually going through that line in the first place. But it doesn't help once you get through that. Just going back to those the two questions, I agree with Vanda to a degree. I think the triggers for the different kind of addictions can be similar. They can be the same root causes, etc. I actually think they're quite different addictions, which I think backs up what you were saying. Simply because there is only so much drink that you can drink without physical things starting to happen. Before you start changing colour, before your liver starts rotting or whatever. But there's only a certain amount you can drink before that happens. Similar with drugs, there's only so much you can pump into your arm or up your nose or however you want to take it without some kind of physical effect showing, and somebody will identify it. With problematic gambling, it's hidden. It's the hidden addiction. You can keep gambling anonymously for as long as you can afford to do it. I did it for nearly a decade. So that's where there's a different element to it in terms of, I think there's a finite amount of drink or drugs you can take. With gambling, it can carry on and carry on and carry on until the rock bottom.
Paul, can I just ask you a question? You've been very frank with us all, because you told us that you stole money from your company, and most people who I've talked to have ended up doing that because they ran out of money, so they had to get it from somewhere. Yeah. So actually, I think the work that Epic's doing, telling with companies, which is saying to them, look, you need to identify this, A, because you've got a responsibility for your staff, but B, because actually, frankly, you're most likely people they're going to steal from, is the equivalent of being able to see some signs, not physical signs in the sense of on your body, but there are major signs. I mean, these are huge sums of money. I mean, I can absolutely assure you I couldn't get all the £433,000 easily today. I mean, I'd have to sell my house in London. But, there are signs, and whether they're physical signs in the sense of, like your skin's going yellow, or your behaviour, I think there are signs. One of the things that I talked very tragically to someone whose son committed suicide, and she had slightly convinced herself that the reason why he was on his phone a lot on the internet was that he was trying to pick up girls without, and was embarrassed to tell her. I mean, so he was absolutely obsessively on his computer and on his phone, and she didn't want to interfere and so on. But now, of course, she realises that what he was doing was chasing losses and gambling and so on. So I think what I would like to see is a world in which, as I said before, people are willing to say, hey, what are you doing? And you talked about one of your mates, didn't you? You said that you bet 750, you somehow let him know you put 750 quid on a horse and he was a bit shocked. What I would like to do is to create a world in which when you then sort of didn't talk to him, he'd go, look, come on, 750 is a lot. You got a problem, is there anything I can do? Now, can I then make you or anyone else respond to that? No, I can't. But what I can do is try and create an environment where people are thinking about gambling and are thinking, hold on a minute, why is this guy spending hours and hours and hours? I mean, no offence, but if I was your wife, I wondered why you got up at 2 in the morning.
Let's take a couple more questions. The gentleman back there and the gentleman in the front, please.
Thank you. I'm really struggling with this one because I walked in the room thinking, you know, gambling feels a bit out of control. You know, on the other hand, I can't possibly conceive of us making it illegal and forcing it underground because we know that absolutely doesn't work. So it has to exist in a controlled and regulated way. And then I started thinking, I work in the communications industry, and I wonder whether it's a matter of the fact that the regulators are really struggling to keep up with the technological movements, because certainly from an online perspective, could be easily an offshore transaction, and I know they're trying to move it much more onshore with changes to VAT legislation thing. But the facts are, it's very difficult for a regulator to regulate something that's an offshore transaction involving, a currency movement and things like that. And then the big elephant in the room, of course, is taxation. So the government enjoy huge taxes out this, like they do from alcohol and like they do from
cigarettes,
smoking and things like that. So there's a balance here, and I just wondered whether it's for the regulator to get right on top of the technology so that it's balanced. And I do wonder then whether the industry should have perhaps some more responsibility in terms of, if gambling is carried out by money that's been stolen, then they're perhaps not entitled to keep it. And that might focus, their moves towards being a little bit more diligent about the people who take money off.
Thanks. The gentleman at the front here, please.
Two things that come to mind. Paul mentioned about the 11 to 15-year-olds, did you
Yeah.
say, was a problem group. And what's interesting from knowing from my own son and his friends and listening to them talk is, I'm telling you, at that age, I did not talk about gambling. No one did. But it's part of the language. So the question is it out of control? There's an issue where possibly it is. Because why do people of 11 to 15 talk about bets and odds and spread bets and all these things that actually I still don't understand, I'm glad to say, but it is part of the way in which they speak, so it's part of their lives. The other thing you said, and you made an analogy with drink driving from the past. That was not, I say driven, that's also the wrong word under the circumstances, but it wasn't the drinker that became the person that stopped that from happening. It's other people who come along and make you feel bad about it. It became socially unacceptable.
Exactly.
And that's the point you're making. But as Paul's pointed out, when he's on his own at 2 o'clock in the morning betting on Brazilian football, that's not going to happen. So that's not a particularly good comparison, is it really? Because it wasn't the drinker that was doing it. It was everybody else that was saying, don't drive. They still would have been.
Thank you. So I think there are 3 issues there that we should try and look at. Let's look first at the technological advances that make it A, very hard for the industry to regulate, and B, very hard for there to be kind of social disapproval, because actually this isn't the sort of betting that you described your granny doing, of having a nice bet on horses, or in fact the kind of betting that you like to do, or thinking about the league of football. It's something that's completely solitary and completely not something that anybody would be able to keep an eye on or make you feel bad about. So how do we deal with the technological advances that are making this totally new territory, both for the industry and for the user?
Can I take regulation one, Paul, if you don't mind? Okay, so I absolutely agree about the regulation issue and keeping up. So in my real life, I didn't always go to give you my CV, but it doesn't matter. I'm actually a regulator. I regulate I was a post-com regulator. I was one of the people who regulated the whole postal service and all the people who were rivals. And I'm currently something called a civil service commissioner, and I regulate all the appointments to very senior government jobs. I run those interview panels. This is one of 5 roles I do at the Senate. So my background is regulation. So I could tell you that as a regulator in this country, it is quite hard to regulate because you can't do things on a whim. You have to prove a case, you have to prove something's gone wrong, you have to write white papers, there's a whole process of consultation and so on. So even if you know something is quite bad, as a regulator in this country, Ofcom, Ofwat, all the people you've heard of, genuinely telling you it takes about 2 years. Okay? Now, we can argue whether that's good or bad, but I'm just telling you that's the reality. I used to do that. That's why Senate is actually quite a good idea, because we're a self-regulator, And if we can tell the industry to do it and they have to do it, it happens much quicker. So as an example, if the Gambling Commission had wanted to ban adverts before 9 o'clock, it probably would have taken them 2 years. We did it in 2 weeks.
And a quick factual question. Something you said made me think that not all of the big gambling companies are signed up to Senate.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So what proportion?
We've
of
got
the
about
industry
90% of the high street bookmakers. What we haven't yet got is some of the big online people, which I think is an issue, and it's one of the things if no one's asked me what I'm planning to do next year, but I can tell you what I'm planning to do next year. I'm trying to convince the big online companies to join as well, because I do think this is an issue.
Right.
Do we talk about money laundering briefly?
Let's come back to that.
Let's
Let's come back to that in a minute. So technology and regulation.
Yeah, I think technology and the advances of technology have taken it to a whole new level. As I explained, it's no longer the man who's going into the bookshop or the lady who's going into the bookmaker's shop. It's online. It's anonymous. Now, Vander's talked about the regulator there. I want to talk about the sort of industry themselves and the actual operators. And let's use my example. I had 93 separate betting accounts. I had 16 of those with one of the bookmakers. I had 9 with another one. I had 7 with another one.
Under the same name.
Under the same name. I just changed the password. I just changed the username. So each of those bookmakers, and to be fair to the Senate group, they've offered to investigate that into me. It's something that they're not happy with, but that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. Are you telling me over an 8-year period, online gambling, that amount of money, nearly £5 million, that those gambling operators didn't know that I was showing gambling, misbehaviour?
Were they UK based or is it totally global?
Yeah, pretty much anyone, as you can imagine, with 93 different ones, but most of them were UK based. But I know now from all the work that I've done and how much I've studied it, how much they study betting patterns, how much they study gambling behaviour, etc. They knew only too well during that 8-year period that I was a problematic gambler. Now, in that 8-year period, not one betting operator ever questioned me about my gambling. Not one. Now, what I would say as well is during that time I was offered VIP trips to Monaco, I was offered VIP trips to suites in Royal Ascot, I had hampers being delivered on Christmas Eve from betting operators because I was a VIP customer with all sorts in there, caviar, champagne, everything else. So they knew I was a good customer to them, but they also knew I was displaying problematic gambling behaviour. Now, going back to your case, they've got that technology to know I'm a good customer. They also know how they could intervene if they wanted to.
So
and I guess
what are your recommendations then for online companies, both in this country and globally? What can we do to make sure that they see activity like yours and say this is not something we can tolerate?
I think that's someone where the Senate group can get involved. And to be fair, they have indicated that they would do. I think the regulator has to take responsibility for it. They have to say, right, these are very clear guidelines. If a gambler or one of your customers is displaying this kind of behaviour, we expect this kind of intervention.
Yeah.
I don't think we're anywhere near that happening just now.
Can I just move on, because there are a couple of other really interesting areas that have come up. The next one is, what about the proceeds of crime and money that has been stolen?
Right.
What do you think could be done about that?
So the gambling industry is absolutely caught by all the money laundering legislation. So if you try and change money in a foreign exchange bureau, or you try and gamble the same sums of money, they have to go through the effort of discovering who you are. Now, do I think that's perfect? I'll tell you something else I used to do. I used to run Thomas Cook's foreign exchange business worldwide, and at the time the rule was £10,000, and I ran literally 160 countries foreign exchange bureaus, and we discovered we were having problems with our Czech subsidiary, and I went over there to find out why. And this is what I discovered. It was 10,000. It would be $10,000 at the time, and our Czech subsidiary were training their staff to say this: "Don't give me 10,000. You have to write that down. Give me 5,000 2 days." That's actually what our staff were saying. Okay. Now,
Say again, I didn't understand.
Thomas Cook's foreign exchange staff were deliberately telling people to split the money. 5,000 one day, 5,000 another day. Foreign exchange bureaus. So the same sort of issues could be happening in betting shops. So because I've lived through that experience, one of the things I checked was what the training is to staff. And the training is absolutely, you cannot do that. So if you have somebody who's bringing in large sums of money, which you would have to report, betting shop staff are told not to give them hints like come in tomorrow or do it some other way. Now, Can I guarantee that happens 100% of the time? No one can ever guarantee that in retail environments it happens all the time, but I can tell you that the training is extensive. I was made to go on this training, so I absolutely know. I spent 8 hours being trained as if I was a staff member to challenge people. The problem, of course, is online, because if you've got the money and there is no staff intervention and you've no idea where the money came from and no one else does. So this
Just a factual question then. In Paul's case, you still forget quite how much, but that money, once it's, can that money be wrested back from the gambling companies?
no, not at the moment. No,
And
proceeds.
could there be, is there any legislation on the horizon that might look at that?
There's
Or is it just
some,
not
there's
a
some legislation in this
massively
country which is
widespread
called
issue?
Proceeds of Crime Act. I'm afraid I'm not an expert on it, but
Mm.
if
I
you knowingly, if you knowingly take money that you know to be stolen, then they can get it back from you.
So for you, is this an area that needs to be dealt
Yes.
with? Is it being
I think it is. I think it's a really tricky one, to be quite honest. In terms of my situation, and my situation really isn't that uncommon.
No,
All right,
it's
it's
not.
quite sensational with the amount, etc. But there's far bigger cases than mine. But also cases of lower amounts of money. There's still the same seriousness. In terms of mine, I was subject to a Proceeds of Crime Act, and I had to pay back the whole amount of money back to Santander.
But the gambling companies didn't have to refund it.
No, and I suggested that to somebody who I won't name today. I suggested that might be a case, and not back to me, even though I'd repaid it, because I took full responsibility for what I did. I should have paid that money back, and I did, through my pension and everything else. But I did suggest to somebody in Gibraltar that actually, this should have been picked up. Problematic gambling behaviour was there clearly to see for a decade, and I got quite a threatening email back saying, leave this, Paul, or else we'll be telling people you're trying to get money back off us.
Yeah.
And that's not a great situation.
that's not a great
So I should have paid it back. But my idea wasn't to get the money back from me. I said, let's put this towards gambling-related harm. Let's put it towards abandoned greyhounds. Let's put it towards education for children or something like that. But I got quite a threatening email back saying, don't take this, Paul. You're trying to build a business, and we'll expose you.
So can I
For
just
trying to do
quickly do the thing about international, because you just mentioned Gibraltar.
Very quickly, because I want to move on to
Right.
the
So one of the real issues is where either the government regulator here, the Gambling Commission, or where people like ourselves can fix things. We can fix things for people who are based in the UK. And what I think the Gambling Commission has to do is to be absolutely rigid, that no matter where you are, whether you're in Albania or in Australia, if the people who are betting are in the United Kingdom, then the same laws and regulations have got to apply, and they've got to really get that, because cowboys from outside of the United Kingdom are causing huge harm to everyone.
The third issue that came up just now was the question of the ticking time bomb of a new generation of people, incredibly technologically savvy, who are coming to a point when they're going to have a bit more money, where they absolutely know how to do things with a swipe of their thumb on a tablet. And do we have a problem that is waiting to explode because of this kind of combination of a new mindset and this speed that we've never seen before?
Yeah. Can I I'll start with two real life examples. There's two things that are real dangers here, I think. One is social gaming, not just gambling. Gaming is just as important. You'll all know about Candy Crush, you'll all know about the Jewels, you'll all know about these games where you have to spin a wheel and you can get extra credits for free so you can play the game for longer. These are incredibly dangerous for children. And anyone from the age of 7, 8, 9 are playing these every single day. What people don't realise is a lot of these are actually paid for and sponsored by mainly foreign gambling industries, Las Vegas, people like that, Las Vegas gambling companies. And what they do by matching up 3 colours or 4 colours or trying to accumulate things, you're actually displaying exactly the same problematic gambling behaviour as a problem gambler would do. So what these children are doing is they're playing these Bejeweled, the Candy Crush this world every day, whilst they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, totally acceptable, social gaming, it's good fun, and then when you get to gambling age, whatever that may be these days, then suddenly they go through that invisible line into problem gambling a lot quicker. Okay, so that's one. Secondly is around sport and the normalisation of sport. We grow up, sport's probably bigger than religion in this country, that's probably controversial, but for a lot of people it is their religion. And you've got, I'll give you an example of I was asked to monitor a player when I was started working with him in football. I was asked to monitor a player, and who actually, the team who he played against were playing against my team, Preston North End, so it's not really football at all. And I said, right, Connor, come on, you've not seen a Premiership match, probably won't do for a while, let's take you along and watch the match. And I thought to myself, I'll actually count how many times gambling is introduced to him throughout that day. So from putting shirts on, now of course you can't put gambling adverts on kids' shirts, but they see all the adult shirts. From the moment we left the front door to the moment we got back, through a combination of betting kiosks, shirts, sponsored stands, the automatic advertisement boards all the way around the ground, betting slips, everything. There was 27 different betting things were shown to Connor, independent betting things were shown to Connor from the moment that I left the door to the moment I came in. And that frightened me to death, because sport is now completely normalised with gambling. And Vander talked about, a fantastic thing they've done is they've stopped them advertising, people advertising until 9 o'clock. Within sport, that's not true. You watch any sporting event, you will see constant in-play, and gambling, and the actual events themselves. So 27 times we saw it.
Vander, are you worried about it, and what can Senate do for that generation?
Yes, I'm extremely worried about young people, because I think Paul's absolutely right. They are probably, people always talk about how many bookmakers there are on the high street, and frankly I think that's not an issue. I do think it's not an issue, because I think they're going to start closing, because actually the next generation are not going to go into bookmaker shops overall. They're going to be on their phones and on their tablets and on their computers. So yes, I am, and one of the things I'm going to try and do is create a code of conduct for online behaviour, because I think it has to be as responsible. If you believe you need responsible gambling, you need it everywhere. You need it in shops, online, everywhere. People have got to behave responsibly, and they've got to not target children and vulnerable people.
Thank you. Well, I think Michael is going to come up and tell us the exciting results.
Well, thank you very much, Amelia. I think you've done an absolutely fabulous job chairing this discussion. Really great grasp of the subject, and some really provocative questions for both Vander and Paul. I really didn't know which way I was going to vote in this one. I had a reasonably good idea, and I think I've been really impressed as well, both by Vander and Paul, with an incredibly personal account, and also a real depth of responsibility and social awareness about what your industry does, Vander. And I'd like to commend you, both of you as well, for your contributions to this debate. I honestly, genuinely do feel like I owe you an apology as well, because maybe if we'd been discussing bombing Syria or the vacuity of Christmas, we'd have packed out an even bigger room than this one, and often we do. But what I can say, I think, is due to the efforts of Adam, our videographer, this will be a YouTube sensation, so that we can properly market to a better and bigger audience the arguments that you made tonight, that I think fully deserve that. So before you came in, we asked the audience, and the split was 52% were for the motion that Paul was putting forward, 29% were against, and undecided were 20%. I know that doesn't quite add up, but we're nearly there. And of course, a few people arrived late, so there was always the opportunity to win over a few stragglers with your argument. I'm delighted to say that it wasn't an entirely wasted journey, Vander, because you did lift your share of the vote up to 36%, so therefore the winner tonight, with his very compelling personal story, is Paul Bob. Now, it's been a fantastic season that we've put on for you. Thanks to all our regulars for returning tonight, and to all you people watching on YouTube. We've enjoyed working with The Guardian as well, Amelia, and you've done your side of the bargain real pride again. We will be returning in the new year in February with our 2016 programme, which we'll look to announce soon. And once again, I'd like to thank the University of Manchester, Hamilton Davies Trust, Liberty Pensions, and KPMG and Utopia for their fantastic support. And finally, I just want to thank as well all the team from Manchester Central Library. This is a fantastic place to come and think and just stretch this muscle a little bit more. So all of you, have a very, very safe Christmas, have a very happy Christmas, and I look forward to welcoming you all back. And thank you once again to all of you for making such tonight's
Thank you.